Alright guys, in today's video we're going to be doing a maintenance job in order to actually effect a repair. We're looking at the front wheels on this 2013 Chevrolet Avalanche. This is a LT, this is a 1500 series, GMT 900 body style. The owner is saying that on interstate highway braking, it speeds over 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour. You're getting a vibration shudder in the steering wheel. And I suspect this is due to some warpage on the front rotors, either the left or the right, or maybe both. The other problem is at very slow parking speed type driving, you'll occasionally hear a scratching sound. We've already taken a little camera and looked in here, and what we can see is one of the springs on the clips for the pad is bent in and scraping on the rotor. So doing this job is going to fix both of those, as well as put some fresh parts on here. To do this job, you start with pulling this little wheel cover off, and then that'll expose your 6 22mm lug nuts. We're going to zip these off, pull the wheel, and get started. All right. Let's get this wheel out of the way. All right, pretty simple setup. Caliper, pads on either side of the caliper, caliper bracket. The pads are retained by these spring clips. What we're going to have to do is remove on the back side. We're going to have to remove the 2 bolts that secure the caliper to the pins that go inside the bracket, and then to get the rotor we'll have to remove the 2 bolts that hold the bracket to the back of the knuckle assembly. Then the rotor will just come straight off after we remove this little torque screw that's holding it right here. So 1 fastener here, 2 fasteners at either end of the bracket, and then 2 fasteners on the back side of the bracket. I'll get you guys a better view. We'll turn the wheel so you can see that. Let me go get the tools and let's get started. We've got a 20mm on the back here, and the head of the pin is also shaped to take a 19. This is a 19mm, and this is shaped to take a 19mm. So without damaging this rubber boot, you're going to want to work something in like this, and then you're going to want to work your socket in on the back here with a breaker bar. I'm actually going to do the bottom first, over here. Now the amount of torque this is probably under is pretty substantial, so I'm going to get a little bit of an extension to cheat. If this is not enough, then we'll just come in here with a brass hammer and hit this guy. Got to get this oriented the right way to turn it in the direction I need to turn it. Once we can get it to turn a little bit, should be able to do the rest by hand. There we go. And we're going to come up here and do the same thing. Yes, I'm going to use hand tools here, just because that's all you really need, and also because there's not a whole lot of room to work in here with anything else. Barely have enough room to get this guy in here. All right. Did we get this guy to let go? Yes, we did. Okay. All right, let me go down here and fetch my socket and breaker bar, and we'll go ahead and finish these. If all you were doing was replacing the pads, and this bolt is reusable, if all you were doing was replacing the pads just by removing this one on the bottom, you'd come in here and work the caliper free. long as you're not hitting the springs here. Come on, baby, let go. There we go. You can just rotate this guy up. This is actually what the GM service manual would tell you to do. And then you could service the pads and the springs if you were not changing the rotor. In our case, we're going to go ahead and change the rotor, but I thought I'd show you this first. But here we could pull the two pads out, and then we could pull out the springs. If we take a look at these particular pads and work them out, come on, everything's all wedged in here. This one looks... There's that little spring that we were hearing rubbing. So I thought that might have been the wear indicator on the pad, but it's actually this aftermarket clip has somehow gotten itself to where it's rubbing on the rotor. Let's see what the other side looks like. This other side here on the inboard side should have the actual wear indicator. And it does. All right, so we're not too far ready to go, but because of this noise that's happening, we're going to go ahead and replace these anyway. Get this aftermarket stuff off of here. Put genuine GM parts on here. All right. I don't know how that got bent like that, but that's what was causing the noise, I'm sure. And then there's that guy there. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take off the other bolt on the top. Because like I said, we're going to go ahead and take the rotor off. So we're just going to go ahead and get this guy going. Get it to where we can do it by hand, maybe. Cannot find my regular size 19, so this deep socket is really a pain to have to work with. There we go. Finally got that guy off. Get something to retain this guy so we don't have to worry about him taking a walk. And then what we can do now is get the bracket off. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the wheel so you guys can see better. I'm going to pull a couple of 18s off in order to remove this caliper bracket. All right, so we got an 18 here, and we got an 18 down here. So if we can release the clamping force on this one's going to be a lot worse than the others. All right, there's that one. Okay. I can switch tools now and go a little bit faster. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off. We'll come back when we get to the end. All right, almost done. Nope. There's going to be a type of thread locker on these 18s, and so they're going to give you resistance all the way. If they don't, somebody didn't put them on correctly. All right, so we got that guy off. It's a good time to inspect these boots, make sure they're not torn. If they are, you need to replace them. They'll come with a pin kit with new pins. We'll come back to this when we get ready to clean it. We're going to need to clean off any corrosion where the spring clips sit, and then we're going to want to relubricate these pins. All right, so now to get the rotor off, we just need to come down here, pull this Torx. Looks like maybe a T30. All right, to get that T30 off, I'm going to use a tool like this. Basically give it a hit, and it's going to help wind that guy out because usually they're really corroded in there. I like this tool for dealing with these kind of problems though, because it's less likely to strip this little Torx fastener. So he's okay, just some corrosion at the very base of the fastener, but what's important is we don't want the star damaged at all so that we can reuse it. And then with that out of the way, we kind of reposition our caliper bungee setup. Just make sure we're not leaning it on the speed sensor, and we can pull off our rotor. So what we're going to have to do is clean up this minor corrosion around here. Very simple. And then go replace this rotor. This is a Bosch rotor, so it's an OEM supplier. So if we wanted, we could try to see if the machine shop could machine this down. Minimum thickness 28 millimeters, so if there's enough thickness they can take it down, otherwise they might not be able to do anything with it. All right, let's go ahead and get stuff cleaned up and then we'll get the new parts on. All right, let's take a break for a moment and take a look at the official GM service information for this style of SUV truck. Escalade, Yukon, Avalanche, Suburban, Tahoe, all be the same for what I'm showing today. And we're going to take a look at this section here, which is first front disc brake pad replacement. And I'm not going to read all this to you, right? A lot of this is kind of common sense stuff, right? Checking the fluid level in the master cylinder so that it doesn't overflow, getting everything jacked up, getting the wheels removed. You can use a C-clamp the way they show to compress the piston before you remove it. I'm going to show you doing it after you remove it. They highlight not to use any air tools to remove the guide pin bolts. That's to avoid shearing them off. This would include an impact wrench. Hand tools only. That's just GM giving you the advice. If you break the bolt, don't blame GM. Use an open-end wrench, 19 millimeter, to hold the caliper guide pin, and then a 19 millimeter socket to remove the bolt. Don't let the wrench end up leaning up against the caliper. You'll bend the guide pin. Taking that off, removing the lower. Now they're going to talk about removing only the lower and then flipping this guy up to do the pad service and then close it back down and put it back on. This is presuming that you're reusing the rotor and not replacing it. In our video, we're going to be replacing the rotor. supporting the caliper so you don't damage the hose. Here's where they talk about rotating it upward. If you end up, for some reason, you're doing this to inspect a problem and you're going to reuse the brake pads, you need to mark where they were sitting and put them exactly back the same way. This is to avoid getting sounds and vibrations getting introduced, right? And they tell you here again, right? Mark where it goes, put it back the same way. If you're putting new pads on, you've got to replace the spring clips. Do not reuse the old spring clips with new pads. Remove the clips from the bracket, clean where it mates up to the bracket. They tell you to use care when you're cleaning the caliper pistons so you don't damage the rubber dust seal. I'll show you that too. They talk about clean, clean, clean. It's all about cleaning. Very thin coat of high temperature silicone brake lubricant to the pad mating surface of the caliper bracket. Put your new clips on. I'll show you that. And install them in the original position. If you are reusing them, again, this is to avoid noises and vibrations. New ones or old used ones. They're talking about two different things here. New brake pads, there's going to be adhesive paper on the outer for the insulator. I'll show you that. Some manufacturers, if you're not using genuine GM, might have it on both, but the ones we're showing only have it on the outer. And then, again, being careful to mark things if you're using the original. The key takeaway from this whole write-up is don't use any air tools or impact tools. Use hand tools. And 74 foot-pounds when you put those two 19-millimeter bolts back on. That's the torque rating for those two. And then if we flip ahead and we take a look at, there's a little blurb here called burnishing. This is just saying when you do replace the pads, they recommend that you do several stops at no more than 30 miles an hour to kind of set everything in, right? You're just going to sit in a loop here, approximately 20 stops, 15, 20, till you get these burnished in. Now we're going to go take a look at the brake rotor section. It's coming up here. Bear with me, folks. I did not dog ear that particular page. Here we go. It's here. All right. Front rotor replacement on a 1500 series. They're going to repeat this brake fluid level check and getting it properly jacked up and secured and getting the caliper compressed. All this is repetitive from the section we already looked at on the pads. They're going to talk about removing this little T30 brake rotor screw. They're going to give you some advice if the rotor is rusted onto the wheel flange of the bearing. They tell you if that's the case you have, then they can tell you that you can put some oil or some other things on there. You can put a couple of bolts in here, and you can use those bolts to force the rotor to separate from the hub. There's threading on these GM rotors for that purpose. And then when you get ready to reinstall it, they caution you about the importance of resurfacing the flange on the wheel hub, getting all that rust off of there, so everything will show you that. Everything settles back down. They talk to you about if you happen to have been... they talk to you about making sure that the mating surfaces don't have any debris. When they're talking about debris, they mean like flakes of rust, gouges or chips or something like that that's going to keep this guy from sitting flush against that flange. Again, make sure you didn't cause any damage if it was rusted and you're trying to remove it. If you're going to be reusing it, of course. If you're going to be reusing it, make sure you get it in the original position, again, to avoid noise. For a new one, all we're interested in is this. 106 inch-pounds on that T30 when you replace the rotor is the torque value. And then the last thing we are concerned about are pulling out these two 18-millimeter bolts that removes the bracket that the caliper mounts to. They talk to you about the importance of getting the original adhesive off of there, cleaning those bolts, and applying new thread locker, GM 1234-5493. This part number is discontinued. It's superseded. I'll show you the correct one, and I'll put it in the video description. Those two 18s go back in at 148 foot-pounds. So our key torque values are 148 foot-pounds on the 18-millimeter fasteners, 74 foot-pounds on the 19-millimeter fasteners, and 106 inch-pounds on the T30 rotor screw. And then put your wheels back on, and you're ready to go start testing. All right, we've got all this cleaned up. You know, you're going to have some staining and some tarnishing. We just want to get any rust off that might create a uneven surface, and we want to also get anything off that might cause the rotor to stick to the wheel flange here on the bearing. We've got that the way we want it. Now it's time to install the new rotor. So we're going to be going with the General Motors 2295-0036. It's also known as an AC Delco 177-1014. These are made in the USA. These GM rotors typically have like a primer type coating on them. There's a AC Delco that's right below this, so it'll usually be painted in black paint. But we can see here on the back maybe, yeah, so GM rotors are going to have the actual GM logo into the casting so that you know that they're the actual thing. All right, so before we put this guy on, again, just to help with this rust right around this hub area, we're going to put some fluid film on there. It's just to prevent that corrosion, try to make it not stick to the rotor, because if we look on the inside of the rotor, it's all bare steel. And then this rotor is coated with an anti-corrosion material on both sides. We're going to want to get that off with some brake clean before we mount it. We're not going to remove it from the interior side because that actually works in our favor. And then we're going to find our rotor screw hole right here. We're going to line that up with that T30 that we took out. It's going to be beveled, right? Let's see, I've got a T30 socket right here. And we're going to torque this guy down to 106 inch-pounds. No Loctite, no anti-seize, naked metal. £106 is all it's supposed to be. All right, that part's done. Now we cleaned up our caliper bracket. You can see on these GM original brackets, there's actually like a black coating here where the spring clips sit. So when you clean this, you want to not be too aggressive to take that off, because that's helping you. You can see right here there's a piece of it that's flicked off, but in most of the places it's still intact. So that's ready to go. We've wire wheeled off the the back side on both sides where the threads go, and we've pipe brushed where the threads go. We've also pipe brushed the ears that this guy's going to mount to. And we've wire wheeled off as much of the old thread locker as we can get off the threads. You're going to have some of it in here. It's just invariable. It's okay. You want to get as much of it off as you can. Next thing we're going to do now is we're going to go work on these pins. So on these pins, we're going to pull these guys out. We're going to clean off the old cruddy lubricant. And what we're looking for here is anything pitted. If you got corrosion on these pins and it's pitted, they got to be replaced. If you've got the flats where the wrench goes have been worn off, they should be replaced. These guys are fine, so we just need to re-lube them up. If we did have a corrosion problem, we would need to clean out the inside of this. Since we don't have a corrosion problem, this is just a simple re-lube. Now we're not going to like goober it up. Just kind of want to get like a medium coat on here. I'm going to do the same thing to the other one. Kind of twist it in to let the air get burped out as it goes. Should be like that, right? It shouldn't be bouncing around with air trapped in it. Same thing on this side. Now this side looks like there's some corrosion near the top. Let's have a look. So the bottom of the pin's okay. Let's see what this stuff is near the boot side, though. This guy's got some surface corrosion on the boot side. I don't know. I'll try to take some steel wool and see if that cleans up. If it doesn't, this pin needs to be replaced. Go ahead and get some steel wool so I can clean that guy up. Alright, this guy cleaned up okay. I mean, there's no pitting. There's definitely some oxidation staining that has gotten through some of the plating in a couple of places. If it had been like that down here, I'd be inclined to replace this guy. But I think this is good for one more run until we do the next set of pads for this owner. I'll put the part number in the description if you need to get these, if yours are in worse shape. Also want to make sure there's nothing inside where the threading is. That looks okay. So what we are going to do, though, because we found some of that corrosion, I do want to just run a paper towel. I'm just going to use this drift. I just want to gently run this down into the bore, see if we can clear out any debris that might be in here from that. Old grease, that sort of thing. And then we'll relubricate it and put it back in. I imagine this is going to come out kind of brownish, yep. But not too bad. Now, for anybody watching this thinking this is overkill, look, hey guys, this is the brakes, right? There's no such thing as overkill, right? You do whatever you need to do, and then you go further. Just want to get all this old lubricant out of here so that hopefully this time, so right now, I don't know if you guys can see down there, right? So the bore, squeeze this down, right? Nice and clean. I don't know if you can see down it, but it's clean all the way down, right? That's what we want to do. We want to get all the old lubricant out when we have a situation like this and put all fresh in there. So when we do the AC Delco silicone on this side, we'll go a little heavier because we've dried this out. And as we put this in with this drift, I really should be using probably a brass one. Make sure you don't scuff up or scratch the sides. Just try to keep it on the paper. Just want to make sure I keep doing that. Yeah, nothing else is coming out. Okay, great. All right. Now we'll take this guy that we had wrapped up so he didn't get any dirt or crud on him. And we will go heavier now than we did before on the other side, which didn't have this problem. And we'll also make sure we get on the shoulder here. So besides being a lubricant for the bore, this is also going to keep water out. I'm going to run it down a lot slower than I did last time to make sure the lubricant doesn't just get pushed out. Give it a little pinch to let the air have a place to go from the boot. See, we want it like this one. Right now we still have a little bit of air trapped in here. There we go. All right, this guy's ready to remount now. Okay, so I cleaned this. Oh, we're going to have to get some thread locker for these bolts. Let me go grab that. Just real quick, guys, the part number on that front disc brake pin kit is 25910433. What you get inside of these are 2 new guide pins, 2 new boots. These are friction fit into the caliper bore, and then they give you some silicone grease to put in there. So we had 2 of these, but we decided we didn't need to use them on this job, but just so you know what the number is and what they look like. Alright guys, that number I showed in the service manual clip has been superseded. It's been replaced by this AC Delco 10 2029 or GM 1936 9733. High strength, high temperature thread locker red is what this is. Almost out. You can use the witness marks from the old bolt to get an idea of how far it needs to go. I usually just put it on a couple of opposing sides, and then it'll get worked in as we thread it on. Doesn't need to be goobered up. A little goes a long way. All right, now position this guy like this. Get him started, and then we'll do the other one, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the torque value. All right, these guys go to 148 foot-pounds. $18mm again. Okay, that bracket's installed. Let's get the springs and the new pads in. Alright guys, we're going to be using this pad kit from GM 1936-94-15 or AC Delco 171 1252. Everything's going to be laid out nice and neat for us, inners and outers along with our springs. We're going to take some of our AC Delco lubricant. I don't know if I actually showed you the part number for that. AC Delco 104019 or GM 8886 2182. And we're just going to take a small amount of this on the mating surface for these spring clips. Make sure you don't get it on the rotor. All right. Then we're just going to take a little bit more brake clean. It's where we might have touched anything. Also get around here, some of this dust off of here. All right, and then let's just go ahead and put two new springs in here. So, you know, if we look at these old ones, I don't know what happened to have this guy get bent in like that and start rubbing on the rotor, but normally they're going to be flared out like this one. Alright guys, this is just a view of the passenger side just to show you the comparison. It's literally the mirror image of what we're doing primarily on the driver's side. I'm going to come in here now with some AC Delco brake lubricant, just a very small amount, and where we've cleaned and prepped the mounting areas for the spring clips, we're just going to very, very lightly lubricate that, mostly as an anti-corrosion and anti-noise action. And then when you put these clips in, take them out of the box, they are going to sit where this middle piece here is going to sit in between this indentation. Maybe you can see it better on the bottom here, this indentation that's present in the caliper bracket. And they're just going to kind of sit in there like that. Right, so as long as this guy is centered, then, whoops, these two indentations here with this little tab here and this little tab here are going to grab on to the metal of the bracket. And let's see if I can give you guys a close-up of that, right? So we're just going to line this guy in like this. We're going to make sure he's centered. If he's centered, then we should just be able to pop him in. Okay, just like that. I'm just going to kind of peer over on the other side here to make sure, because I don't think this side that the camera's blocking my view on is fully seated. There we go. You want to make sure you hear it click and that you can see it seated against the metal of the caliper bracket in both areas. And then same thing with the top one. This one you can see very easily that we've got that centerpiece in between so it doesn't get caught up on the metal. Then we're going to give it a pinch here, and then we're going to give it, move it over just a little bit because I can see it's not perfectly centered. And then we get a snap on that side. There we go. Now we're ready to put the pads on. So similarly to what we did on the driver's side, we're again going to take a little bit of our lubricant just on the ears. Very small amount. An alternative to doing this, you can put a little bit on the spring clip itself. But we just want to make sure that these pads are able to easily slide inside these spring clips as the caliper moves. And then this pad here that has this blue adhesive on it, this guy's going to be our outer. And now the clips are just going to hold it just like that. And then I prefer to put the wear indicator facing down on the inboard side. You can do it on the outboard side. The service manual, as you saw, doesn't specify. It doesn't matter as far as GM engineers are concerned. If it did, they would say something in the service manual. And then we'll get this guy on the other side. Try not to bump the camera while I'm doing this. Might not be able to get this one in because I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. Now we're ready to put the caliper on this side. So we'll go ahead and get the caliper cleaned up on the driver's side first. And basically what I do when I do these kind of jobs for someone, I do one side at a time. And you make one of the changes over there, then you come over here, make the same change, you go back over there, and I primarily film on whatever side I started on. So I'm going to go back to the driver's side and continue. All right, coming back over to the driver's side, again, got our springs centered in the rotor area here. Let me see if I can zoom in for you just like we did on the passenger side. Right, you just want to make sure that this little bar down here, let's get this zoomed in a little bit more. There we go. This little bar down here is going to sit in the middle of this recess on the bracket, and then you should be able to snap that tab and that tab in. And then we're going to take the pads. We're just going to put a little bit of our AC Delco lubricant on there. Just on the side ears, just a little bit, not a lot. Wipe this off. Then we can come down here and mount this, pushing it up into that clip. And then get it into this one. And that lubricant, I don't know if I showed you that part number earlier. It's AC Delco 10 4019 or GM 8886 2182. And then for the other side, the original one had the wear indicator facing down. It really doesn't matter. You can either put it in where the wear indicator is facing up. Let me get you to the top here so you can see what I'm talking about. You can either have this guy sitting like this, or you can have this guy sitting like this. The service manual doesn't indicate that it matters. So we're going to put it facing down. Just personal preference. Just lubricating up the ear slightly on this one as well. And pushing this in to this spring. Get in there. All right, so now the purpose of those little spring flared out pieces is to keep these guys pushed outward like that. So I don't know how on the old ones that this got so damaged that it was twisted in and rubbing up against the rotor, but that was certainly the source of the noise. And since we had to take everything apart to find that out, they were close enough to needing to be replaced to go ahead and do what we're doing. Okay, now we're going to switch our attention over to the caliper. All right, so we're going to take the old brake pad, put it against the two pistons of the caliper, and then we're going to use this compression tool to depress these two pistons. And again, you want to make sure that you check the master cylinder reservoir to make sure that you don't have it overfilled, because as you do this, you're going to be pushing fluid back into that reservoir. All right, now we've gotten everything cleaned up. See if I can get you guys zoomed in here. So we've used brake clean. We've cleaned the surface, contact surface of both these pistons. We've inspected this boot. Both of these pistons were extended out, and then after we've depressed it to make sure they're compressing evenly and they didn't have any rips or tears in either position. And then what we've also done, if we flip this around without kinking up the hose, I might have to move the camera. I want to show you guys. Actually, you know what I can do is, if I can find it, I think we had a mirror out here. Just trying to show you on the other side that we've cleaned off these ears as well. They're going to make contact with the outside pad's adhesive surface. Just use brake clean to clean that as well. You don't want to use like Goo Gone or something like that, because that could then affect the ability for this to correctly adhere when we put it down here and pull this adhesive strip off here for this kind of anti-noise piece. So I'm going to pull that off now, and we're going to bring this caliper into position to remount it. Got the top one in. And what do I do with those screws? Oh, there they are. So I'm just going to put these screws in, and I'll bring you guys back for the torque. All right, we've driven these guys down with the ratchet. Now we're going to come in here and torque them to 80 foot-pounds. And I still have not located my Shorty 19, so we're going to have to make do with this extra long deep socket instead. And of course I got to work around the camera as well. Okay, when you do this, try to get you guys where you can see. You want to take care not to damage the boot. Just kind of push the boot aside with the 19mm wrench like that. And then you can come in here with a torque wrench, torque it up. Of course, you guys are in my way. What you don't want to do is let this guy end up pushing up against the caliper, because that can end up bending something. And if you end up having any of your lubricant squeeze out in this process, like we have right here, just want to wipe that up, because we do not want that to end up dripping down onto the rotor or the caliper. At that point, we're done. Ready to put the wheel back on. All right, guys, before we put that wheel on, we're just going to give a anti-corrosion coating of fluid film on this outside edge where the rotor makes contact with the wheel itself. Now we can put the wheel on, and we'll put these 22mm lug nuts back on, and we'll torque them down to 140 foot-pounds. All right, after you've got the lug nuts retorqued to 140 foot-pounds, the beauty cover, if you've still got your original genuine GM one, will have the symbol of the tire valve stem imprinted on one side. Line that up with the location of the valve stem, which we see up here. Get these grooves to kind of look like they're going to line up, and it'll pop right on. If you've got an aftermarket one, it's usually not that easy. All right, guys, we're all done with this job. Called the owner, had him take the truck for a test drive, and they can no longer recreate the shudder / shimmy in the steering wheel at highway speed. So what was the cause of the problem here? Well, clearly either one or both of these old Bosch rotors has some warpage in it. And at a certain speed, depending on how bad the warpage is, you're going to get that kind of uneven pad contact, like grab on, not grab, grab, not grab, grab, not grab, and that's going to come back through the steering wheel. I'd say a good 80% of the time when you are braking and the steering wheel is shaking like that, it's most likely a front rotor problem. If you're feeling it in the pedal, it could be coming from the rears, or it could be something with ABS. But this one is pretty easy to call. Now this other thing where these clips, got bent and were rubbing on the rotor, I can't say I've ever seen that, and I have no idea why that happened. If that was your only problem, you could have came back here and maybe bent it back away and got rid of that problem. But this is one off the passenger side, and it was on its way to making contact with the rotor as well. Don't know how that happened, but that solved that problem as well. I hope you guys found this useful just for doing regular maintenance, or even if you're encountering the same unusual problem. If you got questions or comments about what we did, leave them below and I'll try to answer them. If this helped you and you found it useful, appreciate you paying it forward and hitting that like button. And as always, thanks for watching.